you got to start building the personality. You got to start telling people why you exist. And that always starts with strategy. That's getting really clear on your mission, your vision, your values, your customer, and then what their values are, how that overlines with your business values. So those brand strategy foundations are really where it starts. And then from there, you're building the visual identity, the design side of things out based on that strategy.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Meghan Martin, the brand director and marketing manager over at Funk It Wellness. Meghan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pat, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. Can you start out with an overview? What is Funk It Wellness? And first of all, listeners, just so you don't feel like you need to cover your ears, that's F-U-N-K. But Meghan, with that, tell us a little about Funk It Wellness.
Appreciate the clarification, especially on podcasts. Sometimes you say it too quickly and you're like, what did Dave say?
There's a couple parents that hear that and immediately race over to pause the podcast and say, oh, maybe not while my kids are in the room.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yes. So Funk It Wellness is a women's hormone health company. We specialize in promoting hormone health through 100% food-based supplements. So our primary kind of hero product is a seed cycling kit. Seed cycling's kind of gained a lot of traction in the women's wellness world over the last few years, I would say. Kind of mentioned some bigger wellness companies have kind of started picking it up and things like that. And we also have a 100% food-based multivitamin that was created by our CEO and founder, who is a registered dietitian. So that's kind of our approach. We are very much an education-first brand. A lot of the things around women's hormone health, we weren't even really taught in school. So that we kind of start there, teaching people how cycles work and the phases of the cycle. And from there, using our products to better align with your cycle and kind of find that balance.
And listeners, I want to go through a little exercise and see if you have the same experience that I did. So when I first heard about Funk It Wellness, I checked out the website, and I want you to pause the podcast if you're listening and go to the website, funkitwellness.com. I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds here, but pause the podcast now, check out the website, think about what is your first impression when you look at this website. All right, we'll resume from here. For me, when I looked at the website, the first thought that crossed my mind was, wow, this is a $50 million brand. Now, talking to Meghan, she assured me they're not quite at $50 million in annual revenue. So the theme that I really want to talk about today is, how do you go about building a business that looks like it's $50 million as that gut reaction that someone has the first time they look at the site? So Meghan, where do you want to start with that? That's what I'm so excited to hear from you today.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. That's always reassuring to hear. And hopefully everyone else is on the same page and agrees with you on that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. But brand is huge. That's kind of obviously my role and kind of where I've focused for the last 2 or so years since I've been with the company, and overhauling and just kind of making us look as credible as we can, given the budget that we have, given the size that we are, and kind of the team and the bandwidth that we have to make that happen.
And before we get into brand strategy and all that and leveling up your brand, for the skeptics that are listening that are maybe saying, hey, branding is just a logo and some fancy text on your website, it's a waste of resources, how would you respond to that? Why should businesses be investing in building a really cohesive brand?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's how you show up in the world. They say first impressions are everything, right? That's your brand. Your brand is your first impression with your customer and with your audience. So how you're coming across is how they're going to perceive you. As you just said, your first impression of our site was, wow, they're really a big brand. They're really credible, all those things. That's what branding creates for your customer. It creates trust. It creates loyalty. So the more we kind of can put emphasis on that and keep building that and reassuring our customer through our brand identity that this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and this is what you get when you interact with us. That all goes into it.
I want to play the role of client for a minute, because I know prior to Funk It Wellness, you were working on the agency side on brand strategy a lot. Let's say I'm coming to you, I'm running an e-com business, and brand is never a thought that crossed my mind. Let's say that I went really extreme. I went with like the Fiverr logo way back in the day, and I've just been running with it ever since then. If I were to approach you today and say, Meghan, how do I level up my brand? What do I need to be doing? Give me the overview. Where would you want to start in terms of those assets you really need to think about? And more broadly, how do you start that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start off by saying like, this is maybe a controversial opinion, but starting somewhere, starting with the Fiverr logo, starting with a proof of concept, that's all very valid. And I think that's a good place to start because you need that. You need to have something going. But to start the brand conversation and to kind of start, again, building that customer loyalty, building that brand people can continue to resonate with and grow with and understand you're more than just a product and kind of work into their lives in more of a way than just providing a product or service. You got to start building the personality. You got to start telling people why you exist. And that always starts with strategy. That's getting really clear on your mission, your vision, your values, your customer, and then what their values are, how that overlines with your business values. So those brand strategy foundations are really where it starts. And then from there, you're building the visual identity, the design side of things out based on that strategy.
So if I'm starting that process from scratch, let's say I have basic mission, vision, unique value propositions. I have a general sense of who my customer is. How do I go about looking for, I guess I would say, the intersection between those two different groupings?
Yeah. And you're saying in terms of like the company's values versus the target audience values, or is that the intersection you're talking about?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Yeah. I like to look at it as like a Venn diagram, right? You have your business values, your company or your target audience values on one side, your company values on another. And then in between is kind of where you overlap. Those really, you want to hit on those feeling. It depends on the brand. This is where it gets a little in the weeds because it really depends on the type of brand you're trying to create, right? Are you B2B? Are you direct to consumer? What's your product? All of these things kind of go into those factors. And then who is your target audience and what do they care about? Are you trying to create a lifestyle brand? Are you just trying to be an Amazon brand that has no personality and you just want to build it and sell it? There's a lot of factors. Your intention is pretty important in all of these things. But let's say for the sake of this example that you are wanting to create a direct consumer brand, kind of that cult favorite brand, right? We need to understand why those brands really focus on lifestyle. They're not just talking about the product, but they're talking about, they know who their audience is and they're creating a brand that fits into their audience's life beyond product. Is it aesthetics? But there's other things we can think about beyond product and how our brand might fit into a customer's life. So for us, again, it's education. We're not just talking about our product, but we're educating people on something much greater. So a lot of times our customer is also interested in other wellness topics. So we talk about broader scale, like nutrition, things like that. So it just depends on the brand and what your focus is and then who your audience is and what they care about. So kind of finding those points of intersection.
People ask me all the time, should I be using ChatGPT to create content for my site? So here's the thing. AI is great at quickly spitting out blog content. It's also great at pissing off your following. If you've spent years building your brand and follower base, why would you risk that all with AI-generated content? At Intergrowth, we work with companies that see their brand as an asset to get more customers through human-crafted articles that your customers look for online. We master your brand voice and work with your team to write the best articles on the internet that bring you customers on autopilot from search engines like Google. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team. I'd love to get your opinion on the visual side of things. Could we even look at Funkit as an example and talk through how you and the team ended up deciding, I'm going to broadly say on the visual identity, this is coming as a plebeian who has very little understanding of brand, but I think of like color scheme, let's say like font styles, font sizes as like kind of the big things that come to the equation, but I'm sure I'm only getting a small sliver of that. So can you talk to us about the visual side of the Funkit Wellness brand and how you decided on some of those core elements?
Yeah. So again, it starts with strategy, right? First, we nailed down who are we? Who do we want to be? We looked at kind of what are those feeler words that we want people to associate with when they interact with our brand. A lot of brand strategists use archetypes or things like that to kind of drive the brand personality and tone. I like archetypes. I have kind of a different perspective on archetypes, but we did have one. And, kind of nailing that down first to get an overall vision of how we want to look from a whole. I look at things kind of very whole picture first and then break that down. Okay, what does that mean when it comes to colors, when it comes to fonts? And then the other element with Funkit was that they were already an existing brand when I came on. So there was a sense of brand awareness that they already had. It was very bold, very bright, playful, kind of the antithesis of most wellness brands at the time that were very kind of like black and white and minimal. And even in the name, right? The name is Funk It Wellness. So like being funky was one of the things we really wanted to incorporate, and kind of sticking to that in order to make it make sense, right? Especially with the name being so unique. For me, I was like, okay, if we're not going to change this name, then we really need to go for it and we need to stick with it and be consistent with it. So that was kind of the things that started driving the visual identity, and then translating those into visual identity. It's okay, if we want to be bold, that's our personality. So let's make our colors align with that. Our copy should align with that, things like that. So kind of, and even the imagery, right? Images say a lot without a lot of words. So how are we looking at the style of imagery? Even if you're using stock photography, you can kind of curate those things to make it fit your brand personality. So yeah, starting with those keywords in terms of your strategy, and then putting that into design features, colors, type, etc.
Within that, typeface is something that it's always gone over my head. Can you explain how it is that you decided ultimately on what are the different font styles that you use for the brand?
Yeah. So again, like I said, there was some existing brand characteristics, brand pieces of the identity system that we kept and then continued to use. So for example, we had like an existing logo that we built off of. So it really depends on kind of what you're working with, and again, what the strategy is. But when it comes to type, there's a lot that goes into that. A lot of it is how well do certain fonts work with each other, because that's a big part. You could be like, you don't want to have 6 different typefaces that are all super bold and none make sense. But there's pretty standard hierarchy of like a heading, a subheading, and a paragraph font. So we kind of stick to those. Usually your heading, subheading can be a little bit bolder, a little bit less like clean, for lack of a better word. And then you want a really clean paragraph font. So kind of finding the way, 3 fonts that work really well together, and then get that point across in terms of we want it to be bold, we want it to be fun, we want it to be funky, but also you have purpose that needs to happen. You have to be able to have a legible paragraph font, things like that. So that's kind of how we approach it. Hopefully that answers your question. But yeah.
And for listeners maybe that have an existing brand that are starting to get the perception that whether it be their brand or maybe specifically their website, is really holding back the business perception. Mm-hmm. What advice would you offer in terms of how you can start the process of really leveling up your brand? Because one of the things I heard from what you said is when you came on the team, there were some existing brand assets that you and the team chose to keep, and then others that it sounds like you evolved over time. How do you go about assessing that? What are some good places that if I'm an e-com brand, I should really look to first to say, this is a really good opportunity to level up? Struggling to get new customers? We're here to help. Hey, this is Pat, the host of Customer Growth Sessions. Our agency, Intergrowth, has been helping e-commerce brands like Bella Bridesmaids, Brevity, and JS Dental to get more customers online since 2016. Interested in seeing how we'd help you? Head over to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary consultation with me. That's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show.
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's to ask the question, where do we want to be? Who do we want to be? How do we want to come across? From there, I kind of like to get to what's the end goal and then work backwards, right? So if we want to be more credible, it's also narrowing down like, what is it that's not working? Is it a credibility issue? Is it a just cohesivity issue? That's a big one. I think that was a big one when I came on with Funk It, where we had a lot of things going. People liked different elements, but it didn't really go together. So is that the issue? So narrowing down what first and foremost is the thing we're trying to solve, and then assessing, is there other issues now that we're looking at this that we'd like to address as we're doing this process as well. Usually with branding, you're solving a lot of different things at the same time. But yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's asking the questions and figuring out, where do we want to be? What is our goal? Is our goal to get into retail? Because that's a big factor as well. Because retail, for example, is going to have different requirements than a D2C brand. And that goes into packaging decisions. That goes into like every decision that you make down the line. So first and foremost, it's where are we trying to go? What's missing right now? Kind of doing that analysis, and then kind of looking at, okay, based on this strategy, based on who we want to be, how we want people to view us and interact with us as a brand, where they're interacting with us. Those are the points that drive those decisions.
And let's say for the founders out there that don't have a strong background in brand, that say, hey, we know that we need to hire someone who can come in and help us with brand strategy. Is there a specific scenario where you'd recommend hiring one or multiple full-time employees versus trying to find an agency versus trying to find a freelancer that can help you to level up your brand?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest consideration in that is what's your budget and where are you in your business size? I think those are the biggest things in that. It's always helpful to have someone internally who really knows the brand, who understands what you're trying to do, what you stand for, understands the product. All of those things can be really, really helpful in terms of brand strategy. However, agencies, that's kind of the job of the brand strategist, right? Is to really understand all of those things and get to know the brand deeply so that they can then put that into a strategy that makes sense and provides that clarity. So it really just depends. It depends on the business size. I would say if you're kind of smaller, just getting started, freelancer strategist is going to be really helpful. And then kind of going from there, right? And then maybe it makes more sense to have an agency and work with an agency and outsource it. And then they can also usually help with design. So that's helpful. And then if you're at the point where you want to bring someone in, that brand is, you're trying to create a lifestyle brand. We want brand to be kind of the heart and center of what we're doing. Then it might make sense to bring someone on internally. So it just kind of depends where you're at with your business, I believe.
No, of course, of course. I want to get your take on how you approach some of the educational content, maybe we'll say, for your site. And I look at this from two veins. One, women's health. And you talked about this, that in health class, like a lot of these topics weren't really discussed when we were in school. Women's health, I think, in a lot of people's eyes is still like oftentimes seen as a taboo subject. I think there are some men and certainly some women who don't really feel comfortable about a lot of this going in the spotlight. At the same time, Funky, it's a very in-your-face brand. It's a very loud brand. It has a very strong stance on issues. It would be like one of the summarized takeaways that I had. How do you go about finding that balance between maybe it's keeping your customer comfortable while also staying true to your brand itself?
Yeah. When it comes to education, like I said, our founder is a registered dietitian. So a lot of our kind of educational content, we do stick to a lot of nutrition-based content because that is her expertise. And she is very adamant on pulling third-party peer-reviewed research into our education. So that's a big part. We like to kind of keep the science in there as much as we can. Unfortunately, with women's health, a lot of things aren't studied. So it's kind of can be a piecing things together situation. And that is something we just like to bring attention to as well. There's not a whole lot of research being done. And I think that's a bigger conversation I'm seeing a lot of people get a lot louder about, which is great. But that is kind of how we approach things from the education side is, okay, what research has been done? Where can we kind of draw from that? And then building off of what we've seen people experience but from using our product or what we've heard customers experience. Again, our founder also sees clients one-on-one. So she pulls a lot of information from just experience she's heard from her clients, not breaking any confidentiality or anything like that, but just general topics that are coming up when she's talking to people and patterns she's seen and things like that. So that's kind of how we like to approach things from the education side to keep that credibility. And then because we're in such a taboo on the opposite side, because we're in such a taboo category and topic, using humor and personality to kind of draw attention to some of those things. So poking fun at things or just saying the things that people maybe you shouldn't say, but are so real because they connect with your audience. I think at the end of the day, it's like, wow, most people can relate to that. And they're like, oh my God, this is hilarious that someone actually said this out loud because I can relate to that. So I think that's how we find the balance is on the education side, looking at the science, kind of bringing in as much kind of peer-reviewed research as we can. And then also poking fun at the situation and saying the things that maybe shouldn't be said on kind of the more entertainment side of things.
I love it. I love it. Well, Meghan, I also want to pick your brain. Let's say for the founders out there that have some experience with brand and they want to take the DIY approach to really level up their brand. Are there a series of tools that you would recommend that would be a really good starting place for helping to give them direction, helping them to assess consistency across all their different channels? Yeah, what tools would you recommend for that listener?
Yeah, I think you can DIY. I do think particularly in the early stages, you don't have the budget. Sometimes that's just what it is. And then I also think it can be helpful to have an outside perspective because there are certain things that just from the inside you may not see very clearly, being in it day in and day out. And also in terms of like design consistency, you just might not have the eye for it depending on your background and kind of knowledge with branding and just design in general. So I think it can be done. I'm trying to think if there's specific tools that I would recommend. In terms of consistency, like we talked about type, there's specific like hierarchy things, making sure you have consistent like heading, subheading, paragraph fonts, things like that, keeping consistent brand colors. There's definitely some general guidelines like brand visual guidelines and things like that that are helpful. I wish I had like a specific tool. Nothing is really coming to mind. It's kind of an eye and an understanding. It's hard for me to give like okay, if you follow this, there's definitely guidelines out there I'm sure you can get. I'm sure there's tons of blog posts from strategists and things like that saying, here's the things to look for. So those are always helpful places to start. And then from there, and this is a little biased, but I do believe having an outside perspective is helpful. Someone who has kind of been trained to look at specifically from a designer visual perspective, those things, and can kind of do an audit for you and or kind of make the corrections for you. And then starting with strategy, I think is important. And there are definitely strategy workshops you can do, or even I'm sure questionnaires and things like that you can do to start just like opening your eyes to some of those things. So that's a helpful place to start. I would say if you find a strategist who has those kind of free tools and resources, that's always a great place to start. And then from there, maybe working with someone who can help you make those changes if you are not able to make them yourself.
Absolutely. And I would say I definitely agree with you when it comes to thinking that it might be almost one of those things that you need to have like a specific eye for brand. I think a lot of it is needing to have a really strong baseline understanding. And I say that from the perspective that our company, Intergrowth, has like a whole brand strategy deck that we had like a brand strategist build out for us. And so within that, there's all these different like font colors or I should say like brand colors that we work with. There's the primary, secondary colors. There's like various font stylings that we use for specific scenarios, brand voice characteristics. And I have that document, share it with everyone on the team. For me, it totally escapes me why we have like those certain colors, why we have those certain, let's say, font styles. But I know that, okay, these are the ones that we use. So to your point, it sounds like maybe most founders are going to be way better off if they just put some money into saying, hey, let's work with the best and hire someone who does this every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like what you're talking about is like a brand strategy deck and a brand guideline deck, which someone can provide for you. And then you can kind of use that to guide what you're doing internally and the choices that you're making internally. But yeah, it's helpful to have someone from the outside kind of put that together for you just because they're going to see it more clearly than you will from the inside looking out, because they're looking at it from kind of an outside perspective as your customer would be or as your client would be. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Meghan, this has been amazing. For listeners who want to follow Funkit online, actually, let's start out with listeners who want to buy from Funkit. Where can they go to find you online?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website just at funkitwellness.com, or our seed cycling kits are also on Amazon. So you can also find us on Amazon as well.
Brilliant. And talk to me about socials. What channels should I go to? How can I find you, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, you name it?
Yeah, our biggest channel is probably Instagram. We also are on TikTok as well. And then Pinterest, we're trying to keep that going as well, just to be showing up there. So yeah, we do a lot of educational content there. Also on our email list, we do a lot of educational content. Like I said, we're education first. And then, oh, by the way, we also have these products that will align with all of the things we're telling you. So that's Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and our email list are probably the best ways to get more information from us.
Perfect. Meghan, this has been awesome having you on. Listeners, once again, this is Meghan Martin, the brand director and marketing manager over at Funkit Wellness. Meghan, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Pat, for having me. This has been great.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.